Have you ever been told you're too old to understand how the world works anymore? My name is Mark Fletcher. I'm 56 years old, and for 22 years, I built the systems that kept Axion Technologies running like clockwork. I was the guy they called when million-dollar production lines broke down at midnight, when critical software crashed during peak season, when newer engineers hit walls they couldn't climb over. I thought loyalty and expertise mattered in the business world, until a new CEO half my age walked into my office and told me I was behind the times. 3 months later, I was packing up my life's work in cardboard boxes while my colleagues sat silent, too scared to defend the man who'd mentored most of them. Carter Nash, our shiny new leader, had big plans for modernizing our outdated company, and apparently that meant getting rid of anyone who remembered how things actually worked. But here's what Nash didn't know about old-school engineers. We document everything. We notice patterns, and we never throw away anything that might be useful later. What would you do if you discovered your boss wasn't just stealing your job, but planning to destroy your entire company from inside? Carter Nash slammed his laptop shut, so hard I thought the screen might crack. "Pack your things," he said without looking up from his designer desk. "You're done here." 22 years of building Axion Technologies from the ground up, and this was how it ended. Not with recognition or respect, but with a man half my age treating me like yesterday's garbage. Nash had been our CEO for exactly 93 days, and in that time he'd made it clear that anyone over 40 was a problem to be solved. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you saying?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. Nash finally looked at me with those cold blue eyes that had been sizing up employees like cattle at auction since his first day. "I'm saying your methods are outdated. Your thinking is stuck in the past. Face the facts. You're behind the times, and this company needs fresh blood." The boardroom felt smaller than usual, packed with executives I'd worked alongside for years. Operations Director Tony Kellerman sat in the corner wearing that same smug smile he'd been flashing since Nash promoted him from middle management. Chief Financial Officer Helen Wright stared at her phone, refusing to make eye contact. These people had eaten lunch with me, celebrated holidays with my family, and now they sat silent while Nash destroyed my career. "Tony will be handling the transition," Nash continued, sliding a thick folder across the polished table. "Your replacement starts Monday morning." My hand shook slightly as I opened the termination papers. The settlement offer was generous enough to avoid a wrongful termination lawsuit, but that wasn't what made my blood boil. What killed me was seeing the signature line that would erase decades of innovation, problem-solving, and loyalty to a company that no longer wanted any of it. "Who's my replacement?" I managed to ask. "Brett Chambers. He worked with me at Pinnacle Solutions before I came here. Young guy, fresh ideas, knows how to implement modern systems." Fresh ideas. Modern systems. Nash loved throwing around buzzwords like they actually meant something. But I've been watching him operate for 3 months, and his modern approach mostly involved firing experienced workers and replacing them with cheaper alternatives who looked good in meetings but couldn't actually do the work. "Brett's never worked in manufacturing," I pointed out. "Exactly. He won't be weighed down by old habits. Old habits like making sure our production systems actually worked. Old habits like double-checking safety protocols before implementing changes. Old habits like caring whether the company succeeded or failed beyond the next quarterly report." I glanced around the room one more time, hoping someone would speak up. Rosa Martinez, my senior developer, looked like she wanted to say something but kept her mouth shut. The other engineers avoided my gaze entirely. Fear had settled over Axion Technologies like a thick fog, and nobody wanted to be Nash's next target. "Fine," I said, signing the papers with more force than necessary. "I'll clean out my office. Tony will escort you," Nash said. "Company policy for terminated executives." Company policy, my foot. Nash was paranoid that I might take sensitive information or cause trouble on my way out. What he didn't realize was that I'd been documenting his questionable decisions since his second week on the job. Not because I planned to use the information against him, but because my engineering brain couldn't help but notice patterns. Like how he'd been asking odd questions about our client contracts and proprietary systems. How he'd been staying late in the office, accessing files that had nothing to do with his actual responsibilities. How his laptop screen always seemed to show external file transfers whenever I happened to walk past his office. Tony followed me down the hallway like I might steal office supplies on my way out. Workers I'd mentored for years whispered behind their cubicle walls, probably wondering if they'd be next. The whole place felt different now. Tense, suspicious, like a family home after parents start talking about divorce. My office looked smaller when I started packing. 22 years of my life fit into 4 cardboard boxes, patents with my name on them, project files from systems that kept this place running, photos from company retreats back when we actually felt like a team. Each item reminded me of problems I'd solved, crises I prevented, innovations that had saved the company millions. The computer files were trickier. Nash had already restricted my access to most systems, but my personal laptop contained backup copies of diagnostic tools I developed over the years. Tools that weren't technically company property since I'd built them on my own time using my own resources. "Hurry up," Tony said, checking his watch. "Nash wants this wrapped up before 5 o'clock. I ignored him and kept packing methodically. Hidden beneath routine files on my personal drive were months of observations about Nash's activities. Email logs showing unusual communication patterns. Security footage timestamps that didn't match his official schedule. Financial records that raised questions about vendor payments and consulting fees. None of it proved anything illegal, but together the pieces painted a picture of someone with secrets. Someone who might not have Axion Technologies' best interests at heart. Rosa appeared in my doorway despite Tony's disapproving stare. "This isn't right," she whispered. "Everyone knows you're the reason half our systems work at all." "Take care of yourself," I said, palming her a small flash drive. "But if things get strange around here, you might want to look at what's on this." She pocketed it quickly while Tony pretended not to notice. Walking through the lobby for the last time felt surreal. The security guard nodded sympathetically. He'd been here almost as long as me. The receptionist looked away, probably embarrassed to witness my exit. Through the glass windows, I could see Nash in his office, already on the phone with someone, probably discussing his next victim. But as I reached the parking lot, I realized something Nash had overlooked in his rush to get rid of me. Being behind the times meant I still believed in keeping detailed records, following proper procedures, and documenting everything important. And those old-fashioned habits were about to become his biggest nightmare. My kitchen coffee tasted better than anything from Axion's break room. Strange how losing your job could make simple pleasures feel more meaningful. 3 days had passed since Nash escorted me out like a criminal, and I was finally starting to process what had actually happened. The morning news played quietly in the background while I sorted through files on my personal laptop. Axion Technologies stock had dropped 12% since the announcement of management restructuring. Corporate speak for Nash's plan to fire anyone who might question his methods. My phone buzzed with another text from Rosa. "Brett started yesterday, already making changes to the production line software. People are nervous. Changes to software that had run flawlessly for 8 years. Software I designed from scratch after the previous system failed spectacularly during our busiest quarter. But Brett was modern and fresh, so obviously my work needed immediate improvement. I pulled up the backup files I copied to my personal drive over the past few months. What started as routine system maintenance had turned into something much more interesting once I noticed Nash's unusual access patterns. Late-night logins, file downloads, external drive connections, all using his executive credentials when the building should have been empty. The phone rang, interrupting my investigation. "This is Jennifer Cole from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Economic Crimes Division. I received some interesting documents in my email yesterday." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number." Documents about potential corporate espionage at Axion Technologies. Documents sent from an anonymous email account that traced back to your home internet connection. I've been more careful than that. The anonymous email service I'd used was supposed to be untraceable. Apparently, federal agents had better computer skills than I'd assumed. "I'd like to meet with you," Agent Cole continued. "There's a coffee shop called Murphy's on Elm Street. 1 hour." She hung up before I could respond. Murphy's coffee shop occupied the corner of a strip mall that had seen better days. Agent Cole sat in the back booth, looking nothing like the federal agents in movies. Mid-40s, practical clothes, tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too many cases like this one. "Smart move, sending those files," she said as I sat down. "We've been watching Carter Nash for 6 months." "Watching him for what?" "Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, conspiracy to defraud investors." She slid a manila folder across the table. "Nash has done this before. 3 companies in 5 years, same pattern every time." The folder contained photographs, financial records, and employment histories that painted a disturbing picture. Nash would get hired as CEO, identify the most valuable intellectual property, then systematically transfer it to competitor companies in exchange for future employment guarantees. When the original company collapsed from lost market share and sabotaged operations, he'd move on to his next position. Pinnacle Solutions, his previous company, lost $80 million in contracts after their proprietary designs somehow ended up with their biggest competitor, Agent Cole explained. Nash walked away with a golden parachute while 800 people lost their jobs. And now he's doing the same thing to Axion. That's where you come in. The files you sent us show clear evidence of unauthorized access to proprietary systems. But we need more to build a criminal case. I studied the photos of Nash's previous victims, engineers, designers, and innovators who dedicated their careers to companies that betrayed them. People like me who'd been labeled behind the times while their life's work got stolen and sold. What kind of more? We need documentation of the actual transfer. Proof that he's actively stealing designs and selling them to Quantum Dynamics. Quantum Dynamics, Axion's biggest competitor, and, coincidentally, the company that had been landing suspicious numbers of contracts lately with products that looked remarkably similar to our innovations. How do I get that proof? Agent Cole smiled for the first time. You wait for him to make a mistake. And based on what I know about Carter Nash, that won't take long. My phone buzzed with another message from Rosa. This one was longer and more urgent. Production line is down. Brett's changes caused major system failures. Nash is panicking, screaming at everyone. 3 clients already canceled orders. Can you help? I showed the message to Agent Cole. She nodded approvingly. Looks like the mistake just happened. When desperate people make desperate choices, they get sloppy. What are you asking me to do? Go back. They'll beg you to fix what Brett broke. And when you're back inside, you can help us catch Nash red-handed. The idea of returning to Axion Technologies made my stomach churn. Facing colleagues who'd stayed silent during my termination. Working alongside Brett, who destroyed systems I'd spent years perfecting. Pretending to cooperate while secretly gathering evidence against Nash. But then I thought about Rosa and the other engineers who'd dedicated their careers to that company. About the 800 people who'd lost their jobs at Pinnacle Solutions. About the pattern of destruction Nash was spreading from one company to the next. If I do this, I need guarantees about my legal protection. Full immunity, witness protection if necessary, and a consulting contract with our cybercrime division when this is over. Agent Cole handed me her business card. Think about it, but don't think too long. Every day, Nash operates. More people lose their livelihoods. I walked back to my car with Agent Cole's card burning a hole in my pocket. The choice seemed obvious from a moral standpoint, but going back to Axion meant risking everything on the hope that justice would actually prevail. My phone rang again. This time it was Helen Wright, the CFO who couldn't meet my eyes during the termination meeting. "We need your help," she said without preamble. "The production shutdown is costing us millions. The board wants to bring you back as an emergency consultant. What about Nash? What about me being behind the times?" Nash is reconsidering his position on that. I could hear the desperation in her voice, and suddenly I realized this wasn't just about fixing broken systems. It was about catching a predator who'd been hunting companies like mine for years. Rosa's panicked voice cut through the phone's static like a knife. "The whole factory floor is dead silent for the first time in 15 years, she whispered. "Brett locked himself in your old office and won't come out. Nash keeps walking around yelling about lawsuits and bankruptcy. I sat in my car outside Axion Technologies, watching employees huddle in small groups near the parking lot. Some were smoking cigarettes with shaky hands. Others stared at their phones, probably updating their resumes. The place looked like a hospital where someone important had just died. How bad is the damage? I asked Rosa. Brett, tried to upgrade the main production software yesterday morning. Something about optimizing efficiency protocols and modernizing data flows. Pure garbage, if you ask me. Now the assembly line won't start, the quality control systems are frozen, and the shipping computers think it's still 1987. Classic mistake. Brett had probably seen some fancy presentation about artificial intelligence and decided our reliable systems needed immediate replacement. Never mind that those systems had processed millions of orders without a single major failure. Never mind that changing core infrastructure required months of planning and testing. The board called an emergency meeting an hour ago. Rosa continued. Helen, Wright looked like she was going to throw up. Even Tony Kellerman seemed scared, and that guy usually acts like he owns the place. I grabbed my emergency toolkit from the trunk and headed toward the main entrance. The security guard, Frank, nodded grimly as he buzzed me through. Glad you're back, he said. This place has been falling apart since you left. The lobby felt different, quieter, more desperate. Employees whispered in corners instead of walking with purpose. The usual hum of productivity had been replaced by an uncomfortable silence that made everyone speak in hushed tones. Helen Wright met me at the elevator, looking older than her 53 years. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much lately. Thank God you're here, she said. We're hemorrhaging money every minute this line stays down. 3 major clients have already threatened to cancel their contracts. Where's Nash? Conference room with the board, trying to explain how a simple software update turned into a complete system failure. She pressed the elevator button repeatedly, as if that might make it arrive faster. Between you and me, some board members are asking serious questions about his leadership. The engineering floor looked like a disaster zone. Brett sat hunched over a computer terminal, his expensive suit wrinkled and his hair sticking up in random directions. Empty energy drink cans surrounded his workspace like a fortress of failure. Thank God you're here, he said without looking up. This system architecture makes no sense. Nothing matches the documentation, and every time I try to fix one problem, 3 new ones appear. I pulled up a chair next to him and studied the screens. Brett had managed to create a cascade failure that would have been impressive if it wasn't so devastating. He tried to replace the production control system without understanding how it connected to inventory management, quality assurance, and shipping coordination. The real documentation was never digitized, I explained. Some knowledge exists only in the minds of people who built these systems. That's impossible. Modern software engineering doesn't work that way. Modern software engineering assumes you're starting from scratch. We've been building on the same foundation for over a decade, adding layers and connections that only make sense if you understand the history. Brett looked frustrated and embarrassed. Nash said you were behind the times. He said your methods were outdated and inefficient. Maybe they are, but they work. I spent the next 4 hours carefully reversing Brett's changes while he watched and took notes. Each system had to be brought back online in a specific sequence, like starting a massive engine where timing was everything. Brett had tried to jumpstart the whole thing at once, which was like trying to perform heart surgery with a chainsaw. Rosa appeared with coffee and status update from around the building. Nash has been on the phone with someone for the past 2 hours, she reported. Sounds angry and desperate. Keeps mentioning lawyers and contracts. What kind of contracts? Hard to tell, but I heard him say something about quantum dynamics and missed deadlines. That got my attention. Agent Cole had mentioned quantum dynamics as Nash's likely partner in corporate espionage. If Nash was talking to them about missed deadlines, it suggested their relationship went beyond normal business competition. Rosa, I need you to do something for me, I said quietly. But it has to stay between us. She nodded. Set up your phone to record audio, then find an excuse to walk past Nash's office. We need to know what he's discussing with these people. Is that legal? Recording conversations in common workplace areas? Perfectly legal. Besides, if Nash is doing what I think he's doing, we need evidence. Brett had been listening to our conversation with growing confusion. What are you talking about? What's Nash supposedly doing? I studied his face carefully. Either Brett was an excellent actor, or he genuinely had no idea about Nash's illegal activities. His confusion seemed real, which meant he was probably just a pawn in Nash's larger game. Brett, how well do you know Nash? I mean, really know him? We worked together at Pinnacle Solutions for about 8 months. He offered me this job when he got hired here. Said it was a chance to implement cutting-edge solutions without being held back by legacy thinking. Did he ever mention why he left Pinnacle? Something about wanting new challenges, better opportunities. Brett paused. Why? Is there something I should know? Before I could answer, Rosa returned with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her face was pale. You need to hear this, she said, holding up the device. Nash wasn't talking to lawyers about contracts. He was talking to someone at Quantum Dynamics about delivering our client list and production specifications by tomorrow morning. The recording played Nash's voice clearly. Don't worry about the shutdown. It's temporary. By Friday, you'll have everything you need to steal every major account Axion has left. Agent Cole answered her phone on the first ring. Perfect timing, she said before I could speak. We just intercepted communications between Nash and Quantum Dynamics discussing a major data transfer scheduled for tonight. I sat in my kitchen again, but this time Rosa was with me, nervously sipping coffee while we planned our next move. The recording she'd captured of Nash's phone conversation was playing softly in the background, his voice laying out plans to destroy Axion Technologies from the inside. How do we catch him in the act? I asked Agent Cole. You're going back to work tomorrow. Act normal, fix their systems, pretend everything is fine. Meanwhile, we'll have surveillance equipment monitoring Nash's every move. Rosa looked scared. What if he figures out we're watching him? That's why we need multiple people involved. Agent Cole explained to the speakerphone. Rosa, you'll monitor Nash's computer activities. We need timestamps of every file he accesses. Our technical team is going to guide you through installing tracking software on the company network. The plan sounded dangerous but necessary. Nash had already destroyed who knows how many companies, and Axion Technologies employed over 400 people who had no idea their jobs were being systematically eliminated by their own CEO. There's something else, Agent Cole continued. We've been monitoring Nash's personal finances. He's received 3 payments from offshore accounts in the past 6 months, totaling over $2 million. That money didn't come from his Axion salary. $2 million. Nash was getting rich while destroying the livelihoods of everyone around him. The sheer greed was staggering, but what made it worse was how he pretended to care about the company's future while actively working to destroy it. What about Brett? Rosa asked. Should we tell him what's happening? Not yet, I said. Brett seems genuinely clueless about Nash's real agenda. If we bring him into this too early, he might accidentally tip Nash off. The next morning, I walked back into Axion Technologies carrying my old toolbox and a hidden recording device Agent Cole had given me. The engineering floor buzzed with nervous energy as employees tried to pretend everything was normal while secretly wondering if they'd have jobs by the end of the week. Brett greeted me with obvious relief. The production line is running again, but we're getting weird error messages in the quality control system. Show me. The errors were actually new security protocols I'd quietly installed while fixing Brett's mess the day before. Agent Cole's technical team had walked me through adding monitoring software that would track every file access, email, and data transfer happening on the company network. Nash wouldn't be able to steal a grocery list without us knowing about it. Must be a legacy compatibility issue, I told Brett. I'll work on it this afternoon. Around noon, Nash appeared on the engineering floor for the first time since my return. He looked nervous, constantly checking his phone and avoiding eye contact with most employees. Good work getting things running again, he said to me with fake friendliness. Brett learned a lot from watching you fix his mistakes. Brett's a smart guy. He just needs more experience with our specific systems. About that, I've been thinking we should document your repair process. Create detailed guides so future problems can be handled without bringing in outside consultants. Every alarm bell in my head started ringing. Nash wasn't interested in documentation for training purposes. He wanted detailed technical information he could sell to Quantum Dynamics along with everything else. Documentation takes time, I said carefully. Right now, I'm focused on preventing future system failures. Of course, but efficiency requires proper documentation. I'll have Tony work with you on creating comprehensive technical manuals. Tony Kellerman, Nash's loyal lieutenant who'd smirked during my termination meeting. Having Tony involved meant Nash planned to steal my repair knowledge along with everything else. I'll think about it, I said. Nash's fake smile faltered slightly. It wasn't really a request. I understand. But rush documentation often contains errors that cause bigger problems later. Better to take time and do it right. After Nash walked away, Rosa appeared at my workstation with printouts that made my blood run cold. He's been accessing client files for the past hour, she whispered. Contract details, payment schedules, proprietary product specifications. Everything someone would need to steal our biggest accounts. Is he copying the files? Worse, he's uploading them to an external server. Look at these network logs. The data transfers were massive, gigabytes of information flowing out of Axion's network to an IP address registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Nash wasn't just stealing random information. He was systematically downloading everything Quantum Dynamics would need to replace Axion Technologies as the preferred vendor for our largest clients. Rosa, call Agent Cole. Tell her it's happening right now. What about you? I'm going to confront Nash before he finishes uploading everything. That's crazy. What if he gets violent? I thought about the recording device in my pocket and the monitoring software Agent Cole's team had installed throughout the building. Every conversation, every file transfer, every criminal action was being documented in real time. Sometimes you have to take risks to stop bad people from hurting innocent ones. I walked toward Nash's office, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether Axion Technology survived or joined the long list of companies Nash had destroyed for profit. But when I reached his office door, Nash was already gone, and his computer screen showed a file transfer that was 98% complete. Nash's office chair was still spinning when I found his computer screen showing transfer complete, 127 gigabytes uploaded successfully. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized I was too late to stop the data theft, but maybe not too late to catch him red-handed. The parking garage echoed with hurried footsteps as I spotted Nash loading boxes into his BMW. Even from 50 feet away, I could see external hard drives and USB sticks scattered across his backseat like digital evidence of corporate murder. Going somewhere, I called out, pulling out my phone to start recording. Nash spun around, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and cold calculation in the span of 2 seconds. Just cleaning out some old files. Nothing that concerns you. Funny thing about those files. They seem to contain every client contract, product specification, and trade secret Axion Technologies has developed over the past decade. You're imagining things. Those are personal documents. My phone captured everything as Nash tried to look casual while standing next to a car full of stolen corporate data. Agent Cole had coached me on this moment. Keep him talking, get him to admit details, make him incriminate himself on camera. Personal documents that happen to be worth millions to Quantum Dynamics. Nash's mask finally slipped completely. You don't understand how business works in the real world. Companies rise and fall. Smart people position themselves to land on top when the dust settles. Smart people don't usually steal from their own employees. I didn't steal anything. I repositioned assets to maximize shareholder value. Axion was going to fail anyway. I just accelerated the timeline while creating opportunities elsewhere. The recording captured every word, but Nash seemed beyond caring about consequences now. His voice carried the arrogance of someone who'd gotten away with this scheme multiple times before. What about the 400 people who work here? What about their families, their mortgages, their kids' college funds? Nash laughed, actually laughed, like human suffering was amusing entertainment. Collateral damage. Those people should have developed more valuable skills if they wanted job security. Footsteps echoed through the garage as Rosa appeared with Brett close behind her. They'd been watching from the security office, monitoring Nash's movements through the building's camera system. "We heard everything," Rosa said, holding up her phone, "including your confession about stealing company data." Brett looked confused and betrayed. "You told me we were implementing efficiency improvements. You said this was about modernizing outdated systems." "You were useful, Brett. Nothing personal." Nash opened his car door, clearly planning to drive away with millions of dollars worth of stolen information. But usefulness has limits. That's when Agent Cole stepped out from behind a concrete pillar with two federal marshals flanking her sides. "Carter Nash, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Nash's arrogance evaporated instantly. "This is entrapment. You can't prove I intended to do anything illegal with those files." "Actually, we can." Agent Cole held up a tablet showing transcripts of recorded phone conversations. "We've been monitoring your communications with Quantum Dynamics for weeks. Your conversations about payment schedules, delivery timelines, and profit-sharing arrangements are quite detailed." The marshals moved in to handcuff Nash while he sputtered protests about lawyers and constitutional rights. But Agent Cole wasn't finished destroying his defense. "We also intercepted the $2 million Quantum Dynamics transferred to your offshore accounts. Money that was specifically payment for Axion Technologies' proprietary information." Nash's face went pale as the financial evidence eliminated any chance of claiming innocence. "I want my lawyer." "You'll get your lawyer after we process you for federal crimes that carry a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison." As they led Nash away, he looked back at me with pure hatred burning in his eyes. "You think you've won something? You're still a dinosaur in a digital world. This industry will chew you up and spit you out." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll sleep while knowing I didn't destroy innocent people's lives for money." The garage fell silent except for the echo of Nash's footsteps disappearing into federal custody. Rosa, Brett, and I stood there processing what had just happened, knowing that Axion Technologies had narrowly avoided becoming another victim of corporate predation. "What happens now?" Brett asked quietly. Agent Cole approached with paperwork and explanations. "The stolen data will be recovered from Quantum Dynamics. The offshore payments will be seized as evidence, and Axion Technologies will receive full cooperation from our cybercrime division to strengthen security protocols." "What about Nash's accomplices?" "Tony Kellerman is being arrested as we speak. Our investigation found he was helping facilitate the data transfers in exchange for a guaranteed position at Quantum Dynamics." Rosa shook her head in disgust. "How many companies has Nash destroyed?" "5 that we know of. Thousands of jobs eliminated. Millions in investor losses. But Axion will be the last one if we can help it." Brett walked over to Nash's abandoned car and stared at the boxes of stolen data. "I can't believe I was part of this. When he recruited me, I thought I was joining an innovative company with a visionary leader." "You were recruited specifically because you didn't know enough to recognize what Nash was really doing," I explained. "He needed someone with legitimate credentials who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions about his methods. So what do I do now? Nobody's going to trust me after this mess." Agent Cole overheard the conversation. "Actually, the FBI is looking for cybersecurity consultants who understand how corporate espionage operations work. Your experience with Nash's methods could help us prevent this from happening to other companies." As federal agents loaded boxes of evidence into their vehicles, I realized this was far from over. Nash would face trial, Axion Technologies would need rebuilding, and hundreds of employees would need reassurance that their jobs were secure. But walking back into the building where I'd been called behind the times just weeks ago, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope for the future. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room where Nash had fired me. But this time the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Sunlight streamed through windows that had been cleaned, walls had been repainted, and the heavy feeling of fear that had haunted this place was finally gone. "The third quarter numbers are remarkable," Helen Wright announced to the assembled board members. Production efficiency is up 37%. Client satisfaction scores have reached all-time highs, and we've landed 8 new major contracts. Board Chair Patricia Novak smiled as she reviewed the financial reports. It seems that combining experienced engineering wisdom with modern technology produces better results than throwing out everything that works. I glanced around the table at faces that had avoided my eyes during Nash's reign of terror. These same people now hung on my every word during strategy meetings, finally understanding that innovation doesn't require destroying foundations that already work well. The new security protocols have been particularly effective, Rosa reported from her position as newly promoted head of information security. We've blocked 17 attempted intrusions from competitor companies, and our data protection systems are now considered industry-leading. Brett raised his hand from his seat as Associate Director of Systems Integration. The documentation project is also proceeding ahead of schedule. We're creating comprehensive guides that preserve institutional knowledge while making it accessible to new employees. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Nash had demanded documentation to steal company secrets, but we turned his scheme into legitimate knowledge preservation that strengthened Axion Technologies instead of weakening it. What's the latest on the legal proceedings? Patricia asked. Nash was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison yesterday, I reported. Tony Kellerman received 12 years. Quantum Dynamics paid a $50 million fine and had to return all stolen intellectual property. The room buzzed with satisfied murmurs. But I knew the real victory wasn't Nash's imprisonment. The real victory was proving that companies could thrive by treating employees with respect instead of viewing them as disposable resources. There's one more item on today's agenda, Patricia said, pulling out a leather folder. The board has voted unanimously to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, along with an equity stake that reflects your contributions to this company's survival. The offer was generous beyond anything I'd imagined when Nash threw me out like yesterday's garbage. Stock options, profit sharing, and complete authority over technological development would set up my family's financial future for generations. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I need to discuss something important before accepting. Patricia looked surprised. What kind of concerns? I've been contacted by several companies whose employees reached out after reading about Nash's conviction. They're experiencing similar patterns. New CEOs who dismiss experienced workers, suspicious data access, unusual communication with competitors. Helen Wright leaned forward. Are you saying there are more people like Nash out there? Corporate espionage has become a profitable business model. Nash wasn't working alone. He was part of a network that targets companies with valuable intellectual property. I pulled out my laptop and showed them emails from engineers, designers, and managers across the country. All reported similar experiences, being labeled outdated by new executives, watching valuable colleagues get fired for mysterious reasons, noticing strange data transfers, and suspicious meetings. Agent Cole has asked me to help identify other companies at risk. The FBI is building a task force to combat this type of organized corporate theft. Brett nodded enthusiastically. That's exactly the kind of work I want to be involved in, using our experience with Nash to protect other companies. Which brings me to my counter-proposal, I continued. Instead of just accepting the CTO position, I'd like Axion Technologies to establish a consulting division focused on corporate security and ethical leadership practices. Patricia studied the proposal I prepared. You want to turn our experience into a business opportunity? I want to turn our survival into other companies' protection. We learned how to identify corporate predators, strengthen internal security, and rebuild trust between management and employees. That knowledge could save thousands of jobs. Rosa grinned. Plus, it would be incredibly satisfying to use Nash's own playbook against other criminals like him. The board voted unanimously to approve the new consulting division, with me as director and equity partner. Brett would lead the technical security team. Rosa would handle information protection protocols, and Helen would develop financial safeguards against executive fraud. There's one company in Phoenix that's experiencing almost identical patterns to what we went through, I explained. Their CEO started 3 months ago. He's already fired 2 senior engineers, and employees are reporting suspicious after-hours data access. When do we start? Brett asked. Tomorrow. Agent Cole has arranged for us to meet with their board of directors. As the meeting ended and people filed out discussing implementation details, I remained in the conference room for a few minutes. The same chair where Nash had called me behind the times now represented something completely different, proof that experience and integrity could triumph over greed and manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Cole. Nash's appeal was denied. He'll serve the full 18 years. Thought you'd want to know. Justice felt good, but the real satisfaction came from knowing that Axion Technologies had become stronger instead of becoming another casualty. 400 employees had kept their jobs, dozens of families had avoided financial devastation, and a company built on innovation had survived to innovate another day. Walking through the engineering floor on my way out, I saw Brett training 2 new junior developers on the systems Nash had tried to destroy. Rosa was leading a security workshop for department heads. Helen was reviewing financial protocols with the accounting team. Everyone was building instead of destroying, creating instead of stealing, collaborating instead of competing against their own colleagues. Sometimes being behind the times just means remembering that companies succeed when they value people more than quarterly profits, and that lesson never goes out of style.